the President of the CII, Mr. Shumit Majumdar, the Director General, Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, Mr. Naushad Forbes, Shobnaji, ladies and gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to be at the CII for more than one reason. Around the year, I do get several opportunities, both in India and outside, to work along with the CII, as also with your other sister chambers. And I must confess that historically, ever since they were unshackled, the Indian entrepreneurship has done this country proud. It's always in the interest of the country to have a very large, active, booming private sector, because it's private sector that creates jobs. It's private sector that gives a boost to the economy itself. It is normally conventional in conferences of this kind to speak in terms of what has happened in the past and what steps we've taken. The President of the CII just now already referred to it. I think what's more important is the fact that changes which have been taking place are both directional and structural. And it's equally important to note that whereas one can always differ as to what the pace can be of the changes which are taking place, because in a democracy, the pace of decision making is at times controlled by factors beyond your own control. But at the same time, what's equally important is that the direction of decision making doesn't get reversed. Because it's extremely important that this is a moment which India needs to fully utilize. India needs to utilize this moment for more than one reason. The principle being that we've missed many opportunities in the past. And fortunately, we've reached today a situation where I believe that the public opinion in India is strongly aspirational and wants India to grow. And therefore, any form of obstructions to that whole growth process and what can expedite growth process doesn't get a popular sanction or support. These are very rare moments in history and we cannot allow to lose these opportunities. Secondly, there are factors globally which are hurting economies across the world. And of course, they also have an adverse impact on us. But within that adversity, India is trying to find a place for itself where we are able to stand out. And not only are we able to stand out, but we stand out and get noticed. My own experience of visits internationally, and some of the colleagues here have been extensively traveling with me, is that people are seriously looking at what's happening in India. And in the midst of a global slowdown, we are moving fast. And it's extremely important that we continue the pace of change and reform so that at a time when growth returns to the rest of the world, it will only accelerate the point where we've reached at the present moment. if in adverse circumstances India can maintain its present rates of growth, when growth returns to the rest of the world, to expedite that process should not be very challenging as far as India is concerned. And I believe that even within the present framework, given all the adversities of a global slowdown, the global headwinds being against us, volatility and unpredictability impacting us, global trade shrinking and its impact on our exports, despite all these adversities, I think if we concentrate on the exercise that we have engaged ourselves in and are able to overcome domestic obstructions, we can still reach our optimum levels of growth, which are higher than where we've reached today. And I, for one, instead of repeating what already Mr. Sumit Majumdar has just now mentioned, that we, of course, need a favorable global environment. The other variable is we need a good monsoon. And I think the 4 or 5 domestic tasks that we have at hand, and those domestic tasks indicate that there are several segments of industry where governments have taken proactive steps. For instance, if you look back the last 1 year, there have been proactive steps taken as far as the steel industry is concerned, the revival of the highway sector is concerned, the sugar industry is concerned, steps which have been taken in the power sector. I think each one of them is going to lead to a better consequence as far as these sectors is concerned in the coming 1 year. But there are still some sectors which have been adversely impacted because of business environment around the world, more particularly also in our own country. And the government, as also the industry, will have to put their heads together, work in tandem, and address each one of those sectoral concerns. And obviously those sectoral concerns will also have a fallout impact as far as the overall economy is concerned. You mentioned stalled projects. The Prime Minister's office directly is looking at them. A very large number of them have got started in several sectors. And I'm sure with the kind of impetus taking place, particularly in the highway sector, in the railways, etc., a number of projects in these sectors have got going. But more important than that, I think the taxation reforms which we have undertaken and which we have publicly committed ourselves to, both in the field of direct tax and indirect tax, I think that's an important agenda over the next 1 or 2 years, where we have to cover a lot of space as far as those areas are concerned. And it is that reasonable taxation which will make us globally competitive itself. Our emphasis on infrastructural spending and growth in infrastructure. This year, the amount going to be spent on rural roads is going to be 3 times what was spent in the previous years. The expenditure on national highways is going to be maintained, if not increased. The expenditure on the Indian railways, the capex, is going to be increased significantly. Regional airport connectivity is going to improve this year and being added to the capacities in a big way. The shipping ministry is taking some initiative with regard to corporatized ports, the newer ones to be set up. Now, in each of these areas where a lot of infrastructure spend is going to take place, a lot of economic activity I foresee is going to be generated, and this should eventually have an impact as far as manufacturing is concerned. Hopefully, the movement in the last 1 year as far as the interest rates has been concerned has been downwards. The government has stuck to the fiscal deficit commitments, and inflation has been under control. And therefore, I do hope that this movement will continue in order to make our own economy more competitive with more competitive interest rates. The entire emphasis of extra expenditure on the rural areas. And therefore, this time we've devised various instrumentalities of increasing the spend in rural areas. Targeting individual villages to make sure that each one of them is electrified. To make sure that irrigation spreads. There are at least 5 or 6 heads in the budget. Even though irrigation is a state subject where the central government is taking the lead in assisting the states as far as irrigation is concerned. Additionally, interest subventions, a larger farm credit. Now, each one of these steps in the budget that we've announced, and there are several heads, continuing the expenditure and exceeding the expenditure of the previous years, even on schemes like Manrega, linking them to asset creation, particularly the creation of ponds. Now, these are all instrumentalities by which we are trying to improve the productivity as far as rural areas is concerned. And this ambitious target of doubling the farm income that we have set, wherein other instruments of increasing farm income are also going to be utilized. Hopefully, this should lead to an increased rural demand. And an increased rural demand is going to fill in the holes as far as the economy is concerned, and hopefully may help in reviving private sector investment in this country. While I say this, I am not unmindful of the fact that being a large democracy and a noisy one at that, we have a large number of challenges. And I think it is an important responsibility of all institutions, the government, the industry, the chambers, other thinking people, to make sure that the debate on these issues moves in the right direction and therefore enables Indian society as the world's largest democracy and an aspirational democracy to add maturity to that debate. Take, for instance, responsible political groups taking a position which supports high interest rates. Now, something which is absolutely capable of making us into a sluggish economy. The concern of the retirees world over is addressed by pension funds which bring you the best returns. Already schemes like the National Pension Scheme are bringing very attractive returns. And when more of such products is going to come up, it's a vulnerable section whose interest has to be protected. And therefore, people will have to look at these various products. But in the process, you will have deposit rates and lending rates which have in the long run to come down if the economy is to become more competitive. And therefore, the direction of the debate has to be matured enough as to what helps the interest of the country. And we'll probably have to communicate in simpler languages so that all this can eventually also mean cheaper rates at which you get your loans for houses, for your vehicles, for your education, and for other needs of the society. Take, for instance, this current debate arising out of one of my budget proposals, and I read comments of the Chief Minister of the Union Territory of Delhi, that luxury goods like gold should not be taxed. But I'd welcome if Delhi in the first instance abolishes its own VAT on gold. A union territory which taxes skimmed milk, which taxes almost every alternate food product, which taxes even mithai and sweets, to come up with an argument, and the larger impact is going to be if I keep a luxury item out of the proposed GST, then the standard rate of GST itself will have to go up. Then for us to maintain that rate between 16 to 18%, will become extremely difficult if luxury goods are to be kept out of the GST itself. And therefore, the debate has to mature to see what is the impact of each one of these steps on the larger interest of the economy itself. And I think it is here that chambers like yours will have a very important role to play. I think as far as the Indian industry is concerned, whereas we always welcome its entrepreneurship, I also always appreciate the kind of challenges which you are facing today. But I think the Indian industry is also fighting a major battle for its own credibility. Some recent events haven't added to that credibility. And therefore, in this entire debate which is going on the non-performing assets, I'm quite conscious of the fact that an adverse business environment can lead to non-performing assets. When the cycle reverses, the NPAs also can be reversed. But the approach of leaders of the industry will certainly have to be always positive and ethical, because it is that approach which is going to add to the credibility. I remember I had come in for some adverse comment, including by some of my friends here, where in the 2015 budget, we announced a strong penal law against illegal assets abroad. And at that stage, I had said that those who've committed this mistake in the past are getting one last opportunity with a compliance window in place. So the compliance window operated. Many availed of it and probably some didn't. And today when I see contrarian reports appearing, and which are not only impacting India, which are impacting the rest of the world, I think this is a stern reminder to all of us that with the G20 initiative, with the FATCA in place, with bilateral transactions in place, with effect from 2017, the world is going to be a far more transparent institution. And therefore, this kind of an adventurism will prove to be extremely costly for those who have indulged in it. The essence, therefore, of the industry will have to be entrepreneurship and will also have to be credibility. And I think if India aspires to be the fastest growing economy in the world and from there transgress into being a global leader, as far as the economy is concerned, we in government have a primary responsibility in terms of policy, in terms of guiding public opinion. And you in the industry, with all the new avenues of entrepreneurship available, with globally competitive rates, with corruption levels significantly going down, if not disappearing, with a far more ease of doing business, with more and more avenues being made available to you, and a large Indian market at place, this combination of entrepreneurship and credibility, I think, will be the essence of Indian industry as far as the future is going to come. And I'm sure the Indian industry, having led the economy in the past, will continue to move from place to place. And in the course of the next 1 year, which Naushad is going to lead the CII, I hope this year will be less challenging than the last one was. And in the last 1 year, which was extremely challenging, the government and the industry worked together. Hopefully this year the private sector investment in this country and the environment for doing business improves. And in the coming year, you lead the government rather than the government leads the economy. That will be an ideal state for the Indian economy. Thank you very much.